All right, great. So we're live. This is the Catholics Against Militarism podcast, episode 3, and we have as our guest today Dr. E. Michael Jones, who is the editor of Culture Wars magazine, and also, would you call yourself like a Catholic renegade intellectual?
No, I'm Catholic mainstream.
Oh, okay.
The rest of the world are renegades. I'm at the absolute dead center of Catholic tradition.
Okay, you're keeping it real. All right, well, that's one thing that I do like about you. First of all, it's super cool that you agreed to talk to me because I just started this podcast and this is my 3rd episode, and I sent that email to you on a whim, and you were like, sure, let's talk. So I'm looking forward to talking to you. I've listened to a lot of your interviews on YouTube. And what I really like about your voice is that I have no idea if you're a Republican or a Democrat. And I'm not asking you, and I don't want to know.
Yes.
But that's really cool.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think
I love it when women say I'm cool.
Yeah, you are cool.
Thank
just
you.
seems like things are so politicized these days, you know, and so you can it's traditional Catholic or progressive Catholic or conservative or liberal or National Catholic Reporter or National Catholic Register, and it's like everything has a political angle, and I love that you have this authentic Catholic view of things that really doesn't fall into a traditional Republican or Democratic viewpoint.
Right.
So that's the first thing that I really liked about you. And then the second reason I kind of got hooked on listening to your interviews on YouTube is because you talk about things that are really things that I think a lot of us have been wondering about for a long time, us cradle Catholics who grew up in the church, that no one seems to talk about. You're just willing to talk about it, and I think that's important, and I think it's healthy.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One of the things that you said that really helped me to understand, I don't know, just to see things differently is one of them was when you said that I think you said there are 3 ethnicities in the United States.
Right. Protestant, Catholic, and Jew. It's a sociological theory called the triple melting pot. So every time I say this, I get in trouble with the white guys because I keep telling them I'm biracial. I'm Irish and German, and they think I'm ashamed of being white, but I'm not white. I told you, ethnicity in the United States is a function of your religion. And so the United States is much like Yugoslavia. This is where I figured it out. Actually, I was doing a book on Medjugorje, and I stumbled across, I'm trying to figure out Yugoslavia. And I realized it's 3 ethnic groups based on 3 religions. And they're always at war with each other. And I thought, hey, that's America. It's exactly that. Because there were times when I'm thinking, I figured out contraception is a kind of warfare, psychological warfare against the people. And then I thought, well, why would Americans wage war on other Americans? Well, that's because they don't think that way. There are 3 ethnic groups. And so it's always one ethnic group fighting with another. And so in the period of my life, growing up as the guinea pig in the social engineering experiment, the Jews and the WASP elite had made an alliance, and they called it liberalism, and they basically waged war on the Catholics, beginning in the period almost immediately following World War II. So I'm talking about Paul Blanchard, the leader of that crusade, wrote a book called American Freedom and Catholic Power. And the widespread feeling among this group of people was that the United States had defeated fascism, and now it was time to take on the Catholics because they were fascists too. So that's, I think, I've been saying it for years now, but I still think it's the best explanation of ethnicity in America. In other words, after 3 generations, no matter where you come from, you end up being Protestant, Catholic, or Jew.
That makes so much sense to me. And when I went to college, you know, they teach you to examine everything from this paradigm of race, gender, and class, as if that was the only way to look at the world. And there's something to be said for that. But when you said that, it put so many things, it made so many things click. I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, where there's like a Catholic church on every corner.
Right.
And in high school, I ended up moving to the suburbs of Atlanta. And there was just something different about living there. But at the time, I mean, I just thought everybody's the same. It doesn't really matter. These things don't really matter. But I felt such a difference living. We were like the only Catholic family on our street. And I found out later that it was a scandal when we moved into the neighborhood because my parents had people over and served margaritas. And, you know, just things like that. And it didn't even occur to us that it mattered. And then I went to Boston College for college, but then I ended up moving to New York. And obviously, New York, there's a lot more Jewish people than in New York than there are in Georgia and Nebraska. So it just, and I never quite felt at home there. You know, it was just a very different culture. And so it helped me. Yeah, it was very interesting. But anyway, so this is Catholics Against Militarism. I tried to make that name as broad as possible. But in hearing some of your interviews, it seems like you kind of are an anti-war kind of guy. Is
Yes.
that fair?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was curious. I know that when you were born in, was it 1948?
Yes.
So in the late 60s, you were like, when Vietnam was going on, you were in high school and college. I was just kind of curious, did you ever, receive your draft card, or were you involved in anti-war movements then, or what was that like for you?
I was so alienated and so cut off from everything. It was hard to say I was involved in anything. I'm lucky I'm still alive after that period, because everything had just been changed on me. I didn't understand anything of what was happening, but I knew I was against the war in Vietnam. And I had vague ideas about making some type of decision about what to do, but I didn't have to make the decision because they instituted a lottery and I got a real high lottery number.
Okay.
So I didn't have to make that decision. And I'm glad I didn't have to make that decision because I just couldn't see going in and fighting that war. I just could not see it. So instead of that, I got married. And I got married in 1969. I was 21 years old. My wife was 20 years old. We hadn't graduated from college yet. And I got a life. I got a life, which is an achievement. And we will be married 50 years in August.
Wow, congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I guess I'm wondering, where did your anti-war views come from then? Like what
Well, I mean, let's go. So that's the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War ends, so it's not an issue anymore. They did away with the draft, and suddenly it's not an issue anymore. And I didn't think about it. And then during the 80s, I got caught up in the anti-communist crusade because the Pope was fighting communism. And yeah, by God, we're all against communism, aren't we? Thank God for those courageous Poles and so on and so forth. And then the Berlin Wall came down and the communism ended. And great. And then all of a sudden, wait a minute, why are we going to war again? Who are these people? They're called neoconservatives. Everybody knows they're Jews, but you can't say that because polite people don't say the word Jew, and they're dragging us into a war. And I couldn't believe it. And so so suddenly the anti-war movement resurrected. I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll write an anti-war song. And at this point, I got involved with Irish music. I was in a band in Germany in the 70s, and I lost interest. And then suddenly there's this neo-ethnic revival, and I got involved and I wrote an anti-war song. And then I was going to Switzerland, and it was like the scene in Casablanca where they stand up and sing the Marseillaise. So I'm singing, "Tell George Bush we won't fight in this war," and in Austria, and everybody's singing along, and I think this was great. Didn't stop the war though. And so the net result. So at that point, I mean, I also protested against the war in Serbia. We stood on bridges here because the Serbs were standing on bridges. There was no justification whatsoever for these wars. I think there was a dubious justification for Vietnam, but after the fall of communism, there was no justification whatsoever. And I was just furious at the duplicity and mendacity, and it led me, the war in 2000 invasion of Iraq propelled me to write the Jewish Revolutionary Spirit. That was God's plan, I think, from all eternity, because I thought how can you? I can't explain this. We know the Jews are pushing for this war. You can't say it. Well, what's the political angle? Well, Irving Kristol was a Trotskyite in the 30s, and now he calls himself a conservative. So you can't define this according to any political calculus. It's got to go deeper than that. And that's why I said, the Jew is a rebellion against Logos. Logos is the order of the universe. When they rejected Christ, they became revolutionaries, and that's what they've been ever since. And so I wrote that book 10 years ago. That book came out 10 years ago. And now there's no anti-war movement anymore.
Right. And initially there was, though, when we were going to go into Iraq. I mean, there were hundreds of thousands of people who protested that. It seemed like nobody wanted that war, but it still happened.
Yes.
So like the traditional narrative of these wars that you're talking about is that we had to go bomb the caves in Afghanistan where the terrorists had planned 9/11. And then we had to go into Iraq because of weapons of mass destruction. Saddam Hussein was a bad guy. He was going to get these. So I'm taking that you don't buy those narratives. So what would be your explanation? What do you think? Why did we go into these wars that we have yet to extract ourselves from?
For Israel, for the benefit of Israel. Israel has taken over our foreign policy. It's obvious. We are now on the verge of another war, aren't we? With Iran this time. It is all driven by Israel. And if you can't say that, you can't understand anything that's going on with the main source of war in the world today is Israel pushing America into wars in the Middle East.
Okay, how do they do that? How does that happen?
By giving money to people like Donald Trump.
Okay.
I was in Mashhad a year ago. I said to the Iranians, this is in Iran, I said, there are 3 reasons why you don't have a nuclear agreement anymore. Sheldon Adelson, Bernard Marcus, and Paul Singer. 3 rich Jews determine our foreign policy. They have taken over the Congress of the United States and they determine foreign policy. It's that simple. This is the main theater of war now in our day. And there are segments of the CIA, of the deep state, who are very unhappy with this. Mm-hmm. Because to give you one example, I mean, we just not only did we lose the war in Syria, but we just abandoned Venezuela to the communists. Mm-hmm. Well, wait a minute, that's the Monroe Doctrine. You're screwing up like classic American foreign policy because of this fixation on Israel. And if you say that, you're an anti-Semite. They've shut down this discussion ferociously. The Representative Omar Ilhan tried to bring this up. Everybody came down on her. Cynthia McKinney tried to do this years ago. You just cannot object to Israel's control over America's foreign policy. You cannot do it. And to get back to the Catholic angle, where is the Catholic Church now?
I know. I was going to ask you that.
Completely missing in action. That's another thing that we should talk about here.
Well, also, I mean, there were Catholics that went, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is my understanding, that there was like this envoy of Catholics that was sent to the Vatican in 2003 or 2002 to try to get Pope Benedict's blessing for this invasion. And it's my understanding that he basically told them, no, there's no justification for preemptive war.
You're thinking of Michael Novak and Pope John Paul II. That was the Iraq War.
Okay, why did he do that? Like, why, if it's just Israel, then why are these people doing that to try to?
Because Michael, I hope I don't shock you here, but Michael Novak was an employee of the American Enterprise Institute. Mm-hmm. The American Enterprise Institute has one of its main goals the promotion of Zionism. It's Jewish money. It's the Carlyle Group, which is basically a Jewish vulture capitalist operation. And they pump their money into the American Enterprise Institute. And since they always use front men, they use this opportunist shill, Michael Novak, who was a Catholic, and sent him to Rome because Michael Novak was influential, according to him anyway, in Centesimus Annus, the encyclical that came out in 1991. Which was the 100th anniversary of Rerum Novarum. And he claims that it opened the church up to capitalism. It did not do that, but that's what he claimed. But John Paul II wrote a passage in there where he says, if you mean by capitalism the abrogation of the moral law and markets in its place, then no, capitalism is not compatible with Catholicism. Well, duh, that's what it is. So why are you asking a question here? And Novak was a shill. He was, I mean, I don't want to talk badly about the dead, but I called this man a whore during his lifetime. And he was a whore. He was a whore. Okay, a whore, does something for money that, other people do out of love. Well, he did it for money. And he worked for the American Enterprise Institute, and he betrayed Catholic principle left and right because he was paid to do so by rich Jews.
Okay, that's helpful. So what about this? So I believe that the statistics I've seen say that about 25% of our military is Catholic. So I try to reconcile that with the fact that, like, I know Pope Benedict spoke out against the war. And as you said, Pope John Paul II did. And so it just seems to me that war is not talked about anymore in the church as a moral issue. It's like about policy, right? Like it's this separate thing aside from morality that no one, I feel like they give no direction, no spiritual guidance, no context for these wars. And so we have all these Catholic young men and women who believe we were attacked on 9/11 and we had to defend ourselves, and we still have to defend ourselves to this day. And so they go and they fight, and nothing is ever said about it. Why do you think that is?
Do you want a one-word answer?
Sure.
Americanism. The Catholic clergy got corrupted. First of all, Americanism was declared a heresy by Pope Leo XIII in the 1890s. Testem Benevolentiae. Okay, because the clergy here were poor Irishmen for the most part who wanted to fit in with their oppressors, the rich descendants of the English here, and they were willing to compromise the Catholic faith in order to do that for the most part. They were unlike the Germans. The Germans came over here, felt they had a superior culture, and were happy to be left alone in their separate settlements. So I told you I'm biracial, I'm Irish and German. So I can understand both of these insights. So that was part of the problem. There was always this inherent weakness that people are poor immigrants and they want to make their way in a powerful, rich country by emulating the people who are in charge. And so F. Scott Fitzgerald's an example of this. I mean, I could give you many examples, okay? So what happened is after World War II, we had the anti-communist crusade, and basically the CIA went out of its way to recruit Catholic clerics because they knew the Catholic Church was against communism. And the culmination of this was Pope John Paul II working with Ronald Reagan to overturn the Soviet Union. This had a devastating effect on the Catholic Church, okay, because it made the Catholic Church too close to the American empire. And so that's Ratzinger was an example of that. Ratzinger, by the way, was subjected to the most ruthless form of social engineering ever perpetrated on the face of the earth, because he was a 12-year-old in Germany when the World War II ended. Mm-hmm. If you want this, I sincerely encourage you to read my ebook called Werner Heisenberg and Jewish Science, because it deals with this period and the whole period of the German protest against the obscenity that was going on, that was being deliberately funneled into Germany by the American occupying forces. There was a deliberate attempt, and the agent here again was the Jews. Okay, the psychological warfare. You can read the book. I go into great detail there. Okay, but the point here is that after the war, every single magazine, every single newspaper, every single book, every single play, every single TV show had to get a license from the occupying powers. And the man who handed out this license was a Jewish psychiatrist by the name of David Mordecai Levy. And basically they corrupted they created a subservient, docile press that was subservient to American interest. And the big issue came when they started promoting Alfred Kinsey. That was when the word sex became a German word. That was the time when the word report became a German word, and it basically used science, pseudoscience, to annihilate the German opposition to obscenity. I was there. I taught in Germany from 73 to 76. I was watching the girls in my class, these teenage girls, they're reading Bravo. Bravo is a teen magazine. Okay, you didn't read it, but it's all the latest, like the Bee Gees on the cover,
Yeah.
This handsome guy with their long hair and
that was called. So when I was a girl, that was called Tiger Beat.
Yes, that's the guy. So you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So there was an advice column, and it was a man it's supposed to be Dr. Sommer. Fragen für Dr. Sommer. Dr. Sommer is Martin Weinstein. His real name is Martin Weinstein, and he's telling the girls to masturbate. That's what Bravo was about. It was a total sexual corruption of what was going on there. So the United States became much too close. They were involved in all sorts of nefarious stuff, but the church was oblivious to this, or the church was complicit, because what we're seeing now is there were large numbers of clergy who felt that they could now act on their sexual impulses because America was handing out licenses to do that, and so you had a lot of people. What happened was the sexualization of the Catholic clergy. And these people were Americanists.
Okay.
They loved America because America gave them permission slips to act out on their sexual desires. That's how this thing eventuated in what we're now seeing was a homosexual mafia, Cardinal McCarrick, all that type of stuff. These were all Americanists. Killed any type of church resistance to American imperialism. It just died. Completely died. All I can think of is Dan Berrigan in the 60s, where there was some type of Catholic anti-war movement. It completely died.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what did you think about those people that burnt their draft cards? And, even into the 80s, there was, anti-nuclear movements where they try to barricade things peacefully. So that went on into the 80s. It's totally gone now, I think, except for a few, a couple. I know one nun who did something recently and got sent to jail. But what did you think about all that when it was going on? Was it effective? Did you have respect for those people, or?
I knew Dan Berrigan. I met him. I had an artist friend who was his friend, and I got to meet him in person. And I respected what he was doing. I don't think that it was effective. I think it was kind of, what should I say, theatrical. But by the time they were doing this, the issue had been diffused because there wasn't a draft anymore. So they're basically, you're acting all this type of stuff out, and you don't have anybody behind you acting on it. That movement had just disappeared by the time the draft was ended. It was a good witness to the fact that Catholics could be Catholics in good standing and not go along with the American empire, be anti-Americanist. And so in that regard, I respected the guy. And I think he was an important witness. Thomas Merton was another important witness in that anti-war movement. He was a friend of Berrigan. There was a kind of bohemian type of Catholic worker Catholicism. But again, the problem here is the Achilles heel of bohemian Catholic worker Catholicism is the sex drive. They end up always getting involved in some type of sexual complication. It's the occupational hazard of being left-wing, even in the Catholic Church.
Yeah, because there were a lot of priests that ended up marrying the nuns and stuff like that. They kind of left their vocation.
Bill Berrigan was an example of that.
Oh,
and
Phil, yeah.
All like the Maryknolls were heavily involved in liberation theology, and they were running off with nuns in the jungles of Central America and so on and so forth.
Yeah,
it didn't work. Have you had contact with the Catholic worker?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I visited the Catholic worker in New York, and I've read, Dorothy Day's autobiography, and I'm kind of familiar with her a little bit.
Well, if there's ever going to be an anti-war movement, it will be in the Catholic worker.
Hmm.
I just don't see it. I mean, there's a Catholic worker house here in South Bend, but I just don't see it. I'm trying to be friendly. I'm going through, when I wrote the book on capitalism, everybody was saying I was a communist and a socialist, because I am violently against capitalism. And I kept trying to sidle up to the Catholic worker, and they don't want to talk to me
Oh, they
because,
don't.
no, they don't want to talk to me.
Why? Because of the anti-Semitism stuff?
Yeah, yeah, that's it. I mean, basically, if you say something like that, nobody wants to talk to you.
Oh, yeah.
That's all changing now. I have a huge following on the internet. So it's all changing now because that's gone too far. And because people are starting to realize that my position on the Jews is the traditional Catholic position.
I think it's interesting. I have to say, I listen to it a lot, and I had emailed you about some things that make me. It sounds kind of dangerous to me for various reasons, and I'm on the fence on it. But this Sunday in Mass, there was a reading from like Acts 13, and it says something about. I think I wrote it down so I could quote it. It said something like, the Jews were filled with jealousy and with violent abuse. They contradicted what Paul said, and he said they rejected God and they condemned themselves to be unworthy of eternal life. And as a cradle Catholic, you hear these things all the time growing up in the Bible, but no one ever talks about it. And so
Yeah.
I was sitting in Mass going, I wonder what Dr. Jones would say about Acts 13 and this passage and how it relates. Because I don't know, a lot of it's just kind of brushed under the rug and we don't want to address it because it's so fraught with emotion and everything, and it's so difficult to talk about. But as a Catholic, I want to know, like, what is the position on the Jews? Is the Jews of the Bible still, the same Jewish people that we see today? Like, it's a very confusing thing for a lot of people.
That's why you should read the Jewish Revolutionary Spirit.
I do plan to, but how many pages is it? Isn't it like 800 pages? Isn't it like 800 pages?
No, no, that's what that not at all. It's 1,200 pages.
Oh, it's 1,200. Okay. All right. So maybe that'll be my summer reading. Okay.
But you won't be able to put it down. So take out a significant amount of time for it. So you want to know what Dr. Jones will say to that? He will say that the church is not preaching the gospel. It's that simple. They are not preaching the gospel.
Well, they just talked about Mother's Day, so I didn't expect them to actually address what was in Scripture that day. But
it's literally, I go to the Basilica at Notre Dame. One of the Gospels was the famous one about the vineyard.
mm-hmm.
You know the story I'm talking about the vineyard. A man, the owner leased out a vineyard, and he came to these people, and the people took it over. And then he said, "Well, I want my vineyard back." And he sent messengers, and they killed the messengers. And then he sent his son, and they killed his son. Well, guess who these people are? And then Jesus explains it to him at the end that it's the Jews, and you killed the Son of God, and you're going to be expelled from the vineyard, and other people are going to take your place. Well, no one will ever preach on that gospel. They don't preach that gospel because in order to be honest about it, you have to say the Jews were the ones that killed Christ. They have been repudiated, and the Gentiles are now the new Israel, and that's the church, and that's who we are today. They will not preach it. So the priest literally ignores the gospel and preaches on the epistle that day.
Oh yeah, that tends to be how it is, and I think it's just difficult because when this is a part of your faith, you want to wrestle with these questions and you want to know, but if no one ever talks about it, you can't really figure it out. So it's been very interesting to listen to what you have to say on that. There's something you said. I think you were talking to somebody the other day. It might have been like Owen Benjamin. Is that his name? Something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you said something like warfare has become too sophisticated for the church to understand.
Right.
And I've often wondered if the reason why we're not talking about it more in the church, I guess just in an effort to be charitable to the church, is the fact that we have this outdated vocabulary. Like, it's not really about war anymore. Would you call what we're doing overseas right now war? Like, can you even call it a war? We're not at war against any particular nations. We're just like out there, over there doing stuff. Nobody knows why. Nobody knows what we're doing. So it's hard to talk about it in terms of war and peace even, because they were never declared wars.
Right.
They never end. There's no goal. It's just like military operations or I don't know, just occupation or something.
Yeah,
Is
I was when I said that I was referring specifically to psychological warfare.
Well,
And
that's another thing too. Yeah, like the propaganda and the psyops like that they use on their own population. Church has, I mean, the church is. It would take so long for them to catch up to be able to understand what's going on, and then take another 100 years to like write something about it. Like it moves so slow, but history seems to be speeding up, and everything is changing so fast. Is that part of the problem here?
No, the part of the problem is that the church does not want to know because they want to be accepted. They are trying to be accepted by their oppressors.
Mm-hmm.
They internalize the commands of their oppressors. They want to be considered good Americans, and they're willing to compromise their own intellectual integrity in order to achieve that. I mean, Notre Dame University is the classic example of what I'm talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, where they go along with every form of social engineering, no matter how dramatically it contradicts the teaching of the church. They will do whatever it takes to have the approval of the American establishment, and that pattern was established by Father Hesburgh.
Do you have an opinion on some of these? I want to say newer. I think there were universities that were established in the 90s. It seems to me there's a lot of good, faithful Catholics that are sending their kids to these universities, and they're coming out good, faithful Catholics. I'm thinking of like Ave Maria and like Thomas Aquinas and the other one.
Christendom.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, are they? Do you have an opinion on those? Because it seems like they're great places to nurture the faith and help people. When I went to college, I didn't really have that, so I was wondering if you had any thoughts on those universities.
Yeah, they were reactions to what happened at Notre Dame, the Land O'Lakes statement, the secularization, the sellout of Catholic universities. So they were. I think the best of the lot was Thomas Aquinas in California.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Christendom was basically a CIA operation. Warren Carroll was in the CIA. It was created that had that kind of aura, and so as a result, you kind of got the CIA version of Catholicism when you went there. So
Yeah.
it's the danger. The danger. It's like what happened to Mother Angelica, in EWTN. You're saying I was there when she said it in Detroit in '96. She said she's like a stand-up comedian. She's got 2,000 ladies in the palm of her hand, and then suddenly she starts getting serious, and her voice changes, and she starts saying, if the bishops think they're going to take over my station, they're kidding themselves. I'll blow it up before I let the bishops take over.
Wow.
Whoa, this is hot. Wow. What, was she just possessed by some demon? I mean, the voice changed and everything. Well, she got what she wanted, and she handed it over to a neocon cabal. And of course, they took it over. So this is the problem here. How do you resist these political forces that are always trying to co-opt any type of Catholic movement?
Yeah, how do you do that? Do you just keep calling it out for what it is? Like just trying to talk about it?
Yeah,
Or,
I've been remarkably successful because no one. I was fit for polite company for about 15 minutes, I think, when I started Fidelity magazine, and then they realized that I was not going to go along with the political agenda, and then they just let me go. They cut me off. Like Medjugorje, for example. Medjugorje was a CIA, among other things. The CIA was promoting it. I got the dossier from the CIA on Medjugorje for the
why?
Freedom of Information Act.
I didn't know that. Why were they promoting it?
Because it was part of the anti-communist crusade.
Oh, yeah.
Why were this was to Yugoslavia what solidarity was to Poland. So it's part and the Croatians were basically their proxy warriors breaking up Yugoslavia, and this was the entry into Croatian life. And I went there, I exposed the thing, and basically I lost thousands of subscribers because they wanted that to be true. They wanted it to be true. They willed it. And now we've got this. I mean, just yesterday, the Pope announces that he's approved pilgrimages to Medjugorje, but he's not going to say whether it's true or not.
Oh.
Well, why are you going there? If it's not true, why would anyone want to go there? So you can see
Yeah.
you can see the same type. Why did it go on? Why did Pope John Paul II not condemn it? I've written a book on this. It's called The Medjugorje Deception. You'll know more than you want to know about this phony apparition. But he didn't want to condemn it because of the anti-communist crusade. So you got these political people with a political agenda that are willing to compromise church teaching. So that's the short answer, and that's the long answer to why there's no anti-war movement anymore.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. I've always suspected, I don't know, when I started learning about the Divine Mercy, what's it called? Devotion. That was banned, it was suppressed and banned for a long time. Do you think that had something to do with the whole anti-communist thing?
I think, well, Pope John Paul II resurrected. I don't know enough about it to see whether it has some link with anti-communism. Don't know. But the CIA had their fingers in a lot of different operations. Father Peyton's Rosary Crusade was getting money from the CIA. It just had a bad effect on a lot of Catholic thinking because it gave an aura of respectability to basically what has become the world's predominant rogue state, in the United States of America.
I don't think I asked you this already. There was like a poll that came out that said that 45% of respondents in 26 countries thought that the US is the biggest threat to world peace. Do you think that's true?
I'm shocked at that statistic. Why wasn't it 95% of all the people? What's wrong with the other 60% of the people there? Are they asleep at the switch? Of course it's the biggest threat to world peace. Of course it is. I mean, let's be honest here. It's Israel controlling the United States that is making the United States the biggest threat to world peace. But yes, that's true.
And what would you say to people who worry that if the US didn't support Israel, they would be wiped off the map? And it would be like
You mean Ahmadinejad's statement? That was played up. That's not what he said. But first of all, if Israel cannot get along with its neighbors, that's their problem, not my problem, not our problem.
Okay.
If they didn't have the United States and its military might backing them, maybe they would be more civilized. Maybe they'd behave in a more civilized fashion and wouldn't gun down innocent women and children when they marched to the wall, which is what they did a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was just on Red Ice Radio, and I'm talking about this to Hedrick, and suddenly he flashes it up, and there are those pictures. Damn it. I mean, there's the guy, he's running away, and he's getting shot in the back by an Israeli sniper. Well, this is outrageous.
Mm-hmm.
This is an outrageous affront at the moral consciousness of the entire planet.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm saying here is, you're teaching bloody instructions. So if you do that, don't be surprised when somebody picks up a gun in Poway, California, or in Pittsburgh and guns down people in a synagogue.
Yeah.
Because you're preaching the violence is the solution to any problem. And if you're justified in doing that to Palestinians, why is this guy not justified in doing it to Jews? Tell me that. Explain that to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it makes me think about too these shootings that we have in our country now. And I go to watch Netflix, and it's like every single show is about murder. Like almost every show is about a serial killer, a documentary about a serial killer, The Walking Dead, which is basically just people blowing each other's heads off the whole time. I mean, the filth and the vulgar like stuff that's on TV now, it's just, even when I grew up in the 80s, I feel like, I don't know, you could watch some TV before you went to bed, and there was usually like some kind of first of all, they were about families, like TV shows were about families, right? And there was usually like a moral lesson at the end about being kind or not lying or not stealing. Yeah. There was some kind of moral message, and now it's just like you can't see anything that's not about rape, some kind of violence, murder, killing, the president sleeping with somebody. There's a show called Scandal about, I don't know, some affair. It's just horrendous. Everywhere you look, you're just inundated with this like immorality and violence. And then people wonder, well, why are people going out and shooting up schools? It seems like a strange question to ask, considering what we fill our minds with. on a
Yeah.
daily basis.
Yeah, I think basically every place you see the solution to any problem is violence. Abortion being a classic example, where you can this child is inconvenient, so you can kill it. Well, as I said before, you're teaching bloody instructions when you do this, and the result is you've got this pandemic of violence that nobody can seem to get a handle on. And so what we have now is the Israeli ambassador coming and saying, well, we're going to criminalize anti-Semitism now. Well, okay. You mean when I disagree with Dr. Brown, that means I'm going to go to jail now because he called me an anti-Semite because he doesn't agree with my interpretation of the scripture, Christian scripture?
Right.
No. What that's going to do is create more violence. I established it's clear that there's a dialectic now where this guy, 19-year-old in California, feels the walls are closing in on him. Nobody's listening. The time for talk is over. Well, the ambassador said the same thing. The time for talk is over. So he picks up a gun and the ambassador wants to criminalize anti-Semitism. And you have terrorism, repression, terrorism. And that's a dynamic that is now dominating our society. And we are kind of the innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire here.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the clamping down on free speech is only going to make things worse. I have a few questions for you. Thank you so much for your time. It's just interesting to talk to you. So I was watching your interview with Owen Benjamin, and he asked you a question about Antarctica. And he was like, what do you think about Antarctica? What's up with that continent? And you were like, I don't have an opinion. I don't have an opinion on that. It was just an amusing moment because when I watch him interview you, I'm like, that's probably how I would be. I would just want to ask you a bunch of random stuff, like what you think about stuff. So if you're willing to play, I have a few questions for you. And just, one word answers, or you can say pass or whatever. Are you up for it?
Sure.
Okay. And if it's too off the wall, you can just say Antarctica. I don't know anything about that. Okay, so we kind of talked about this, but Dorothy Day, radical communist or Catholic visionary?
Well, she converted from communism to be a Catholic because she saw it as a better way to achieve that goal. So
yeah.
It was both.
Okay.
Conversion.
Okay, here's one I have to ask you. JFK, lone gunman or conspiracy? I'm dying to know.
Well, I mean, if Walter Cronkite said it was a lone deranged gunman, well, if Walter Cronkite said it, it must be true, right? Right? No, I don't believe it was a lone deranged gunman. I think that's preposterous. I think it was a coup d'etat. And I think that he was murdered, and I think that all the suspects have been identified. The CIA was mad at him for the Bay of Pigs. Lyndon Johnson was an ambitious guy. He wanted to become president. The Israelis were ready to kill him because he was going to stop Dimona, their nuclear reactor. He was determined to do that. There were people who just who thought he was a traitor to the United States because he was negotiating through Pope John the 23rd with Khrushchev to end the Cold War. These are all these. There's a line of suspects that goes around the block, and to say it's a lone deranged gunman is preposterous. Does that answer your question?
It does. And I just want to say there's really no right or wrong answer, but you do have 2 points.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Also, speaking of Catholic workers, are you familiar with Jim Douglas and his book, JFK and the Unspeakable?
No.
Oh, it's great. He's a Catholic worker in Birmingham, Alabama. And he's a writer, and he wrote like a great book on JFK called The Unspeakable. And it's based on he ties in Thomas Merton a lot with that. So you might be interested in that, or anybody listening. Okay, one more question or a couple more questions. Okay, peace through strength. Agree or disagree?
It's a slogan. It's a slogan. I mean, who said that? First of all, who said it?
Wasn't it Ronald Reagan? Like, we have to build up our armaments and our military and our nuclear weapons so that we can have peace. Like the whole mutually assured destruction thing.
Bad idea. Okay, bad idea. It's a slogan to distract you from the fact that you're building up the military and you're doing that to engage in war.
3 points. I'm just kidding. There's no right or wrong answer.
I understand.
Are they going to bring back the draft? Yes. Do you think so, or you don't think they will?
No, I don't think so. They don't need the draft. They have college debt. They have student loans.
What do you mean?
Well, this debt slavery, the way you get out of debt slavery is going into the military
Oh, yeah.
and to have them pay off your debt. So you can't get a job. They don't need a draft. They don't need a draft at all.
Okay.
Because of the student loan situation.
Interesting. Okay, last question. If you were the Pope, and not the president, but the Pope, what's one thing you would do to promote peace and end war?
I would go to Iran right now.
Oh.
I would go there right now. And I'd stand in Tehran and I'd say, this is unjust the way the United States is treating Iran.
Cool.
It's an act of war. These sanctions are an act of war. The United States has violated international law. It is violating agreements that it signed. The United States is at fault here, and they should stop doing what they're doing. That's what I would do.
Okay, that's great. And that was my final question. I'd love to have you back because I do think I'd love to talk to you more about, this idea that the Jews are the enemy of the human race, which I know is not it's from scripture. But I do worry that when you call someone an enemy, it would be nice if we lived in a world where Christians didn't want to kill their enemies and didn't want to eliminate their enemies, but we're just like everybody else now, and we do. And so when you call someone an enemy, I feel like there is this implied violence, and it could be dangerous. And so I'd like to have you back sometime to talk about that, because
what you should do is get St. Paul on your show, because he's the one who said it. I didn't say it. All I'm doing is quoting St. Paul. He said they were enemies of the entire human race.
Right. But Jesus said, love your enemies, right?
Well, that means we have enemies, though, doesn't it?
It's true, but we have to love them. And so if you just say the enemy part, but you leave out the love, then...
Do you think St. Paul didn't love his enemies?
I think he did, but I don't think we do. I mean, tell me this. Have you ever gone to Catholic Mass and have had them pray for our enemies? Has that ever happened in your life?
No,
it's never happened in my life.
They don't do that because they pretend that the church doesn't have any enemies. That's why they don't do it. Okay. Everybody loves us, right? Doesn't everybody love us? We love everybody. Everybody loves us. There are no enemies. The Jews are our elder brothers. Everything's fine, except that the whole place is going down the drain with wars and abortion and everything else. But hey, we don't have any enemies anymore. Mm-hmm. This is illusion. Let's get back to the point of reality here. Why do I love the Jews? Why do I love the Jews? Because they are enemies of the entire human race. And I'm told that I have to love my enemy. What have I said repeatedly? You must have seen me say it at least 10 times.
You say that the church's official teaching is that no one has a right to harm the Jew, right?
You're absolutely right. And for 10 years, the ADL has been calling me an anti-Semite because I'm saying no one has the right to harm the Jew.
How about instead you say, I'm just going to be like, why don't you say this? Why don't you say Jesus said love our enemies? And so even if they are our enemies, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it matters. But...
Of course it matters. Let's put it this way.
But we still have to love them, right?
They are. I've already said that. I've said that many times. Maybe not as many times as don't harm the Jew and secret Judaeus known, but I've said it many times.
Yeah.
The question is, I've had this discussion with other people. Suppose you're supposed to turn the other cheek. Okay, right? You've heard that before. Mm-hmm. What if somebody, there's a thug there beating up some old lady over there across the street?
Yeah.
And wait a minute, he's trying to steal her pocketbook. Wait a minute. Honey, turn the other cheek. I'll turn the other cheek for you because I don't want to get involved in that. What do we turn the other cheek when someone's ready to kidnap your child? You have the right to self-defense here.
Yeah.
Okay? And there is a cultural equivalent to the right of self-defense. That doesn't mean that you have to allow the Jew to destroy your culture by spreading pornography. We know it's a Jewish operation. The Jews admit it. They brag about it. Amy Dean said the Jews are behind gay marriage. Does that mean that we have to just roll over and say, well, I love you guys, so corrupt the institution of marriage, spread pornography, use billions of dollars of American money to buy weapons to kill Palestinians? Go ahead. It's okay. It's okay, because we Catholics, we don't believe in anything anymore. This is the main obstacle. When I talk to people, young people, and they say, what should I do? I said, get baptized, because that's what Peter said when the Jews said, what should we do? And I said, go get baptized. Okay. And they say, why should I? The Catholic Church doesn't believe in anything. Do you realize the scandal that these people are giving? The scandal? Because this corruption, which I've talked about, is sexual corruption, political corruption through Americanism. The church now has a reputation of standing for nothing. For nothing. They don't preach the gospel.
Well, they stand against abortion. That's about the only thing.
That's true. That's good for them that they do that, because that was the one thing that never went down. They thought that Justice Ginsburg bemoaned that fact. We shouldn't be talking about abortion now, she said. That's settled law. Well, no, the Catholics never. That was the bone that got stuck in the Catholic throat. And they can't swallow it and they can't cough it up, and it's just stuck there. And it's going to be that way.
Yeah. And they're pretty good about maintaining the line on contraception and things like that. So far, gay marriage, they haven't come out in support of that. So aren't there a few things that they're...
I'm a Catholic. I'm a Catholic, okay? And I'm telling people to join the Catholic Church, but I'm telling you what they tell me. They have been compromised. They need to stand up for what they believe. Preach the whole gospel, not just the convenient parts.
Okay, I agree.
Thank you.
I would agree with that. It's been good talking to you. Thanks for your time. Maybe we'll talk again sometime.
Okay, my pleasure. Good talking to you.
All right, have a good night.
Okay. Bye-bye.